The year Nathan graduated, the national movement to send educated youth to rural areas swept across the country like a tide no one could stop. It was supposed to be a shared sacrifice, a call to duty distributed equally among the young and able. What Nathan never anticipated was that the person who would seal his fate on that list would be the very woman he had loved with everything he had. His fiancée, Clara Voss, sent him away to the countryside so that her best friend's younger brother could take the city post that had been secured for Nathan. He spent 7 years there. 7 years of hard labor, dusty roads, and silent nights, while she stayed behind, perfectly comfortable, apparently waiting. And when he finally came back, she dropped to one knee in front of everyone and proposed. The crowd erupted. Cheers, gasps, the kind of breathless collective delight that forms when a story seems to be reaching its most satisfying conclusion. Everyone assumed Nathan would say yes. After all, he had once been the boy who chased Clara Voss with a devotion bordering on obsession, the one who had won over the coldest, most untouchable woman on the entire university campus through sheer, unstoppable persistence. But they had all forgotten something. Or perhaps, more honestly, they had chosen not to remember. Clara had chosen another man. She had given Nathan's city placement to Victor, a man she insisted was simply an old classmate in need of help. She had believed every lie Victor fed her without question, used Nathan's family name as leverage against him, and ultimately signed her own fiancé's name onto the countryside assignment list. Then she watched him board that train alone, without a word of apology. Now she was on one knee, holding out a ring, as if those 7 years had been nothing more than a brief intermission in their story. It was Serena who cornered Nathan first, long before Clara even arrived at the reunion. Serena had always possessed an impressive talent for filling silence, the kind of woman who could talk at length about almost anything, especially other people's business. She positioned herself beside Nathan at the table and leaned in close, her voice weighted with urgency, laying out everything Clara had supposedly done for him during his absence. How Clara had used her connections to make his living conditions in the countryside less brutal than they might have been. How she had never married anyone else. How she had waited, faithfully and quietly, for 7 years. Nathan listened without expression. His face remained still, his eyes calm, and Serena grew increasingly desperate in the face of his silence. "Can't you at least say something?" she finally burst out, loudly enough to draw nearby glances. "Clara did all of this for you. Don't you feel even slightly moved?" Nathan looked at her for a moment. It had been 7 years since Clara's name had appeared with any frequency in his daily life, and somewhere in the long stretch of those years, that name had lost the weight it once carried. The passion he had once felt for her, the consuming, relentless kind that had once seemed indestructible, had been quietly dissolved by time. What remained was not bitterness, not even sadness. Simply nothing of consequence. "Whatever happened between Clara Voss and me," he said, waving a hand with the kind of ease that comes only from genuine indifference, "is the past. Let's leave it there." The table went silent. Not the polite, temporary quiet of a conversation pausing, but the stunned, airless kind that follows something no one expected. To understand why the room reacted as it did, one would have to understand who Nathan had once been. He had grown up as the only son in a comfortable household, pampered and proud in the way that position often produces, but never unkind. His confidence came from a genuine belief that effort could conquer most things, including the heart of the most guarded woman on campus. He had pursued Clara Voss with that belief firmly in hand. He invited her to dinners and films, to long, unhurried walks that stretched well beyond what either of them planned. When her mother fell critically ill, he persuaded his family to call in favors and secure a surgeon of genuine skill. During the recovery, he made sure Clara ate properly, 3 times a day, never letting exhaustion become her excuse to neglect herself. When other men showed interest in her, he made his presence known, not aggressively, but with the kind of steady, unhurried clarity that said this woman was already spoken for. When Clara dreamed of teaching, it was Nathan's father who quietly smoothed that road for her. And slowly, like ice thawing at its very edges, Clara had let him in. The woman who had once regarded everyone from behind a composed wall of silence began reminding him to dress warmly before stepping out in the cold. She fussed over him when he was sick and sat with him when he was low. She stood in front of him once when someone called him shameless and defended him with a loyalty that left him speechless. She introduced him proudly to her friends during holidays, and leaned into him with the natural ease of someone who had stopped pretending not to care. He had believed, with every reason in the world, that they would keep walking forward together. Then Victor arrived. Victor was someone Clara had known in middle school, a figure from her past who resurfaced 3 months before the next round of countryside assignments were announced. He was polished, soft-spoken, and skilled at presenting himself as the kind of quiet, suffering soul that certain people find impossible to resist helping. Alone in the world, intelligent, burdened, everything designed to draw out Clara's protective instincts. Nathan was not suspicious at first. He trusted Clara completely, and extended that trust outward, treating Victor with open warmth simply because he was connected to her. But then the changes began. Clara became unavailable. Vacations they had planned together dissolved beneath a fog of excuses. Meetings were cancelled with little explanation. On their 2-year anniversary, a date Nathan had been quietly looking forward to for weeks, she claimed she had unexpected school duties and couldn't make time. Something didn't sit right. Just days before, she had mentioned she had no scheduled classes. The school administration had never once failed to accommodate her, given his father's standing. Acting on instinct more than suspicion, Nathan went to check. She wasn't there. A colleague, speaking without thinking, mentioned that Clara had taken the day off and gone to the department store. Nathan found her there. She was walking beside Victor, both of them carrying shopping bags, laughing with the ease of 2 people who had entirely forgotten that the rest of the world exists. Sophie, Clara's younger sister, walked with them, her face alight with a particular, unmistakable excitement. She looked up at Victor with unconcealed admiration and said, cheerfully and without hesitation, "Victor, I really think you and my sister are a perfect match. Can I just start calling you brother-in-law?" Victor smiled, the warm, pleased smile of a man who did not find the suggestion unwelcome at all. Clara glanced at her sister and said, "Don't talk nonsense." But her tone was not a correction. It was the indulgent sound of someone who doesn't truly mind what's being said. Nathan stood not far away, watching. His eyes were red before he could prevent it, and the ache in his chest was the kind that goes beyond ordinary anger, a sharp, hollow pain that arrives when something you trusted completely is revealed to have been quietly crumbling for some time. Clara looked up and saw him. She didn't flinch. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Those 5 words lit something inside him that he had been working very hard to keep contained. He crossed the distance between them in a few strides. "Is this the urgent school matter you couldn't possibly get away from?" The sarcasm was barely contained. His tone irritated her further. She straightened, her voice sharp. "Victor is a new records administrator. The principal asked me to help him settle in since we're acquainted. I'm here on official business. Get your facts straight before you interrogate me." Nathan stared at her. In all the years he had known Clara, she had never spoken to him like that in public. She had always been aloof, difficult, at times, but she had never been cutting. Never dismissive in front of others. Not with him. She seemed to realize it herself, because something shifted in her expression. She reached out and took his hand. "I'm sorry," she said, quieter. "That was harsher than I meant." He pulled his hand away. "Then what did you mean? If you were busy, you could have just told me the truth. There was no need to lie." She reached for his hand again and this time held it firmly, her soft fingers lacing through his. "I wasn't lying. The principal really did ask me at the last minute. And I also wanted to pick out a birthday gift for you. I know I haven't had much time for you lately." She looked directly at him, her voice steady. "My heart belongs to you. That hasn't changed." The warmth those words produced was immediate and irritating, because even as it spread through him, he remembered Sophie's cheerful suggestion and Victor's easy smile. Then explain why Sophie called him brother-in-law. Clara sighed, glancing toward her sister. She says whatever comes into her head. She knows who her actual brother-in-law is. Come home with me tonight and I'll cook for you properly. Just us. She was a gifted cook and rarely made time for it. The combination of her words and the quiet sincerity in her face nearly unwound every argument he had. He was on the verge of relenting when Victor jogged over, his eyes already wet and shining with the precise degree of emotion required. "Nathan, I'm so sorry," he said, head slightly bowed. "I know this situation is uncomfortable because of me. I can ask the principal to find someone else. I don't want to come between you and Clara." His voice broke carefully at the edges. Before Nathan could respond, Sophie exploded. Why do you always bully people? She pointed directly at Nathan, her voice cutting through the noise of the department store around them. You bullied my sister, and now you're going after someone who's done nothing to you. What kind of man does that? Nathan stood very still. He had always been kind to Sophie. He had spoiled her without being asked, buying her things, treating her like a little sister, because loving Clara meant extending that love outward. He had not been prepared for the realization that, underneath all of it, this was what she actually thought of him. Clara let go of his hand and moved to Victor's side. She spoke to him softly, touched his arm, and with a few quiet words had him composed again, with the practiced ease of someone who has done this many times before. Nathan watched and felt something cold settle permanently in his chest. That evening, Clara came home with groceries and made good on her promise. The meal was excellent. But Nathan found he couldn't taste it. He sat across from her and listened as she spoke at length about Victor, how he had supported her through the most difficult years of her adolescence, how she had always felt a debt toward him that she couldn't quite let go of, how she only wanted to repay a fraction of what she owed. My heart belongs to you, she said, holding his hand across the table. You don't have to doubt that. He wanted to believe her. For a moment, looking into those familiar eyes, he almost managed it. Then she brought out a small box. Inside sat a merit medal, an award the school had given her for a research breakthrough. I want to use this as a symbol of our love, she said softly. Today is our 2-year anniversary. I hope we'll have a long future ahead of us. Something in him softened against his better judgment. He accepted the medal, pulled her toward him, and kissed her forehead. The unease that had been sitting in his chest for hours began, reluctantly, to ease. He should have known that peace would not last. From that night on, things only worsened. Clara spent more and more time with Victor. They commuted together, went to the department store on weekends, and their closeness had long since crossed the clear boundary between friendship and something else. The community around them took notice. Rumors spread quickly that Clara and Nathan had ended things, that she had left him. Then Victor knocked on Nathan's door. He arrived holding a plate of dumplings, his expression friendly and unhurried. Clara and Sophie made these today. I brought some over for you. He smiled as though they were old friends. Nathan took the plate. He was about to send him away when Victor stepped inside without an invitation. The moment the door closed, the friendly mask came off completely. I know Clara only got with you because you kept pestering her, Victor said, leaning against the wall with a contemptuous ease he hadn't bothered to conceal. Bold of you, I'll admit. But honestly, you're pathetic. You can tell, can't you, she's into me. She has been for a while. If you had any sense, you'd walk away before this gets worse. Nathan looked at him and said nothing. The urge to physically remove him was significant, but he knew it would only create a mess that Victor would happily exploit. Seeing no reaction, Victor moved closer. Fine. Then I'll keep showing you, one piece at a time, exactly where her heart sits. Nathan told Clara everything that same evening. Every word, precisely as it was said. She refused to believe him. I know you don't like Victor, she said, her voice tight with displeasure, but that doesn't give you the right to say things like that. He's always been decent and gentle. She looked at him with an expression that bordered on distaste. I used to think that despite your temper, your character was solid. I didn't expect this from you. I'm genuinely disappointed. Those words landed with a precision that momentarily left him without language. He stared at her, this woman who was his fiancée, who had received every act of care and devotion he had in him, and she was looking back at him like a stranger whose behavior had confirmed something she had quietly suspected for a long time. You're saying my character is lacking, he said quietly. That I've disappointed you. She was silent for a moment before answering. I'll tell the principal I no longer need to assist Victor. And I'm going to be heavily occupied with research for a while, so we won't see much of each other. You should use that time to reflect on your behavior. She walked out. Nathan stood in the quiet that followed and tried to understand how he had managed to become the guilty party in all of this. He gave her the silence she apparently wanted and stopped reaching out. She was, as promised, busy, or at least she never sought him out. A month later, he saw her at the department store by chance, and she looked directly through him as though he were part of the furniture. He had assumed one of them would eventually break the silence with something resembling an apology. What he received instead was the official notice: his name was on the countryside assignment list. He had grown up the treasured only son of a family with influence. His placement had been quietly arranged well in advance. But there his name was, waiting in black ink. He went directly to Clara. She was responsible for managing the registration of names. There was no version of this in which she hadn't known. When he arrived, she was laughing with Victor. Their posture was easy and familiar. Nearby stood several people he recognized, Serena among them. The laughter died the moment Nathan walked in, replaced by a watchful, uncomfortable silence. Clara. I need an explanation. She looked at him, frowned slightly, and let out a measured sigh. Every family is expected to actively support the rural assignment program. That's not news to you. It isn't, he agreed. And it's also not news that Victor's name was on this list before mine. It's been crossed out. Mine has been added. Why? Before Clara could answer, Victor stepped forward with the smooth confidence of someone who had prepared for this moment. I already have a secured placement, so the countryside assignment doesn't apply to me. You shouldn't be making accusations against Clara. It reflects poorly on her, and she doesn't deserve that. Nathan kept his eyes on Clara. Her expression was complicated, something shifting between hesitation, guilt, and a faint, stealing resolve. Your family is established, she finally said. You have your parents and your sister looking after you regardless of where you go. Victor has no one. A short, cold laugh escaped Nathan before he could contain it. He looked at the woman he had spent his entire adult life loving. Thought about every dinner, every doctor's appointment, every quiet act of care he had offered without being asked. And she stood in front of him and said this. He took 2 steps back. He didn't say anything. There was nothing adequate. Clara reached toward him instinctively, but Victor moved faster. He stepped between them with precise timing, and Nathan caught the flicker of triumph that crossed his face before it was buried again beneath a performance of wounded innocence. Nathan, Victor said, his voice soft and trembling at the edges, I know your father came to speak with me. He told me to leave Clara alone, to get away from her entirely. I'll comply. I'll do whatever you ask. He pressed the corner of his eye, and a carefully produced tear caught the light. Clara's expression changed immediately. What did you say? Serena, who had been observing quietly, nodded from across the room. I did see someone from your father's office speaking to Victor. And with that single confirmation, Clara's face closed entirely. I can't believe you, she said to Nathan, and there was no warmth left in it at all. Victor is alone in the world. I was trying to help an old friend, and your response was to send people to threaten and intimidate him. I used to think your pride was your only real flaw, but now I see clearly. You're rotten, Nathan. Thoroughly rotten. The tears came before he could stop them. He wiped them away quickly with his sleeve and looked at her steadily. Is that genuinely what you think of me? Of my family? You didn't ask me a single question before making that judgment. You accepted their account immediately, without a moment's hesitation. They have no reason to lie to me, she said. And that was the moment the last of it broke. In order to protect Victor, she was willing to assign guilt to Nathan's family on the strength of nothing but Victor's performance and Serena's passing observation. No questions. No doubt. No courtesy. I'll go, he said simply. He boarded the train to the countryside alone. Before leaving, he asked his sister to return the merit medal Clara had given him on their anniversary. Whatever it had once symbolized, it no longer belonged to him. More than 20 years of shared history closed on a train platform, witnessed by no one who mattered. Back in the present, at the reunion, Nathan looked at Serena across the table. I appreciate you telling me, he said, not unkindly. But everything you're describing is the past. We all need to stop looking backward. He stood to leave. Serena moved in front of him. She deserves a chance to explain, doesn't she? After everything. I'm married, he said. The room went utterly still. I'm sorry. Serena stared at him. Married. My daughter turns 4 today. So if you'll excuse me. The silence fractured immediately into overlapping voices. No way. He used to follow Clara around like she was the only thing keeping him breathing. A man that devoted doesn't just stop. He's inventing this. He's only saying it to protect his pride. It's obviously not true. Nathan let the commentary wash past him without so much as a glance. He looked at Serena. Do you also think I'm lying? She hesitated. I just think, Clara gave up a lot for you. The least you could offer is to hear her out before you go. Whatever happens between you afterward is your business. Her voice had softened, but her eyes still held the quiet disbelief everyone else in the room shared. She simply couldn't reconcile the men sitting in front of her with the one she remembered boarding the countryside train, heartbroken, humiliated, still carrying a torch that seemed like it would never go out. People only want to see what they choose to believe. Nathan had learned that lesson more thoroughly than most. He stood up again. Serena moved to block him, and then the door opened. Clara walked in, slightly breathless, dressed in a composed, formal outfit that suited her exactly as one might predict. The cold elegance he remembered was intact, perhaps even more refined. She was the kind of woman whose presence reorganized a room the moment she entered it. But the moment her eyes found Nathan, the mask slipped at its edges. A faint blush rose along her cheekbones. An uncertain smile appeared on her lips, hopeful and stiff and trying much too hard. Nathan, she said softly. It's been such a long time. He nodded politely. It has. And not a good one, if I'm being direct. Her smile froze. A shadow moved through her eyes, and her whole posture folded slightly inward. Are you still angry with me? Is that why you're treating me like a stranger? That's not how we're supposed to be. He recognized this. She had used it before, that particular combination of fragility and quiet accusation that made him feel inexplicably responsible for her pain. It had worked reliably for years. It held no power now. Miss Voss, he said evenly, we haven't seen each other in 7 years. This distance between us is exactly as it should be. What happened back then, I couldn't forgive it then. I won't forgive it now. He picked up his jacket and turned toward the door. She grabbed his wrist. Then she dropped to one knee. In her hand was a small box. Inside sat a ring, and beside it, the merit medal she had once pressed into his hands on their anniversary, the same one he had returned through his sister the morning he left for the countryside. Marry me, Nathan. He stood completely still for one moment, not moved, but genuinely taken aback by the sheer audacity of it. Clara, he said quietly, I think you're confusing me with someone else. I'm not Victor. Something passed across her face, not embarrassment, but a strange, unsettling flicker of satisfaction, as though she had been waiting for any reaction at all and would accept even this one. She tightened her grip on his hand. Are you jealous? I know what I did with the countryside assignment was wrong, but I did it to protect your family. Victor threatened to report your parents if he didn't get what he wanted. I made a choice. I was trying to protect you. Nathan pulled his hand free, unhurried and completely calm. First, I never did anything to Victor that warranted that kind of threat, so there was nothing to protect me from. Second, if my parents had genuinely done something wrong, he had every legal right to report them. Empty accusations and manufactured tears don't convict people. And third, he looked at her steadily. There is no future between us. Not any version of one. Because I am already married, and my daughter turns 4 today. So please, Miss Voss, stop saying things that might cause misunderstandings. I don't want to give my wife reason to worry. The color drained from Clara's face. You're married, she said. It wasn't really a question. It was the mechanical repetition of someone whose mind has received information it refuses to immediately process. And you have a daughter. Her voice began to unravel. You're only saying this to punish me. You're still angry. You swore you would only ever marry me. How could you? Because that was then, Nathan said simply. And this is now. He picked up his things and stepped past her. He had barely reached the front entrance when he heard it, the sharp, happy patter of running feet, and then a small, fearless figure threw itself at his legs with full commitment and wrapped both arms around them. Daddy. He crouched immediately, lifting the little girl up and into his arms. Mia buried her face against his neck and giggled with the pure, uncomplicated joy that only a 4-year-old can produce, the kind entirely unaffected by context or complication. "Did you miss me?" he asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Every single second," she announced with great solemnity. Then Elena appeared. She was, as always, quietly devastating in the way that catches a person off guard even when they're expecting it. She moved with the kind of composed elegance that kept most people at a respectful distance, but the moment her eyes found Nathan, that distance vanished entirely. She crossed the space between them naturally, slipped her hand into his, and leaned into his side with a soft, contented sigh. "Tired?" she asked. "Not anymore," he said. Even after 5 years of marriage, the way she looked at him still had the same effect. Mia squirmed indignantly in his arms. "Daddy, stop staring at Mommy. Today is my birthday. You have to love me the most today." "You are officially the most loved person present," Nathan declared, bouncing her once. "Mommy is temporarily second." "Temporarily." Elena looked at him, one eyebrow raised, her eyes warm and full of something that cut straight through him the way they always had. They had taken exactly 2 steps toward the exit when Clara's voice came from behind them. "Nathan." He and Elena both turned. Clara stood at the edge of the pavement, looking smaller than she had appeared indoors, stripped of the controlled environment that had always suited her, the precision and authority that required an audience to maintain. Her eyes fell to their interlocked hands, and the expression that moved across her face was not anger. It was something older and quieter. The specific, recognizable look of a person confronting an irreversible truth. Mia looked at her with the frank, unfiltered curiosity of a child. "Daddy, is that lady sick? She looks like she might fall down." Nathan gently pinched her cheek. "She'll be all right." Clara said his name again, softer this time, her voice fraying at the edges. Elena spoke before he could. She looked at Clara with the kind of composed, precise politeness that is somehow far more cutting than open hostility. "You must be Miss Voss. As a teacher, you're held to a standard. Calling out to someone else's husband repeatedly in a public place isn't exactly the example most schools want their staff setting. If there's something urgent, say it now. My daughter is still years away from needing a teacher." Clara's expression tightened. Jealousy and indignation crossed her face in quick succession. "Did you know," she said, her voice brittle, "that your husband once chased another woman relentlessly? That he nearly married her?" Elena's expression did not change. But Nathan felt the temperature around her drop by several degrees. He released Elena's hand and placed his arm around her shoulders instead, quiet, unhurried, a claim that required no explanation. "Miss Voss," he said, "as you've correctly noted, nearly. What was almost true in the past is not relevant to the present. Young people make mistakes. Confusing a toxic person for something precious is among the more common ones." He paused briefly. "That said, I do owe you something. If you hadn't done what you did, I wouldn't have been sent to the countryside. I wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't have Mia. So in the most roundabout way imaginable, everything in my life that genuinely matters was made possible by the worst thing you ever did to me. I hope you can find some peace in that. But please, don't come looking for us again. Don't try to disrupt what we've built. I won't allow it." Clara stood looking at him for a long moment, searching his face for some trace of softness, some hairline crack that might be widened. She found nothing. Nathan guided Elena gently toward the car. She walked beside him without hurry, her arm linked through his, her head held at the particular angle that meant she was holding back a great deal of what she was actually thinking. When they were out of earshot, she turned to him. "Was all of that the truth?" "Every word," he said. She studied him for a moment, then looked forward again with the small, private smile she reserved for moments when she didn't want to admit she was moved. "Good." They celebrated Mia's birthday at the restaurant Elena had reserved weeks earlier. The food was excellent, the conversation was warm and easy, and Mia attacked her birthday cake with the absolute commitment of someone who had been waiting for it all day. Nathan watched his daughter and his wife across the table and thought that there were very few moments in life that felt this genuinely, solidly complete. This was one of them. He assumed that was the end of it. He was wrong. The following afternoon, when he visited his parents' house, Clara was standing at the front gate. She was noticeably thinner than she had been at the reunion, and the composed authority she usually carried was gone entirely. In its place was something raw and worn, the look of a person who had not slept properly in days and had run out of the energy required to maintain appearances. Nathan felt a sharp, immediate impatience the moment he saw her. The previous evening, Elena had been clinging and sharp-tongued in equal measure, understandably, given the circumstances, and the conversation afterward had been long and emotionally demanding. He loved her without reservation, but Clara's repeated reappearances were beginning to cost him in the places that mattered most. "What do you want, Clara?" "Just give me a chance to speak with you properly," she said, her voice fraying slightly. "That's all I'm asking for. Please. There's nothing to talk about." "I know I was wrong," she pressed forward. "I know I should have believed you instead of Victor. I shouldn't have let my feelings be influenced by him. I should never have put your name on that list. I know all of this." Nathan stopped. He looked at her for a moment. "The past is the past," he said. "Revisiting it doesn't change a single thing. What we both need is to look forward." She saw the impatience on his face clearly, and something broke through her composure. "I know I made mistakes. I know Victor appeared at the wrong time and I let him affect things he should never have been near. But I honestly only saw him as a classmate I felt obligated to help. In my heart, I was always yours. I've been waiting for you to come back. I've never stopped. Clara." He cut her off, not harshly, but with an absolute finality. "You keep saying that. But you also just admitted you had feelings for him, at some point. So let me be direct with you, even if none of it had gone as far as it did, even if nothing had ever happened between you and Victor, I still wouldn't go back. It's no longer about him." She faltered. "Then what is it about? You never chose to believe me. Not once, when it counted. You believed Victor, Sophie, Serena, everyone, before you believed the person who had given you more of himself than anyone else ever would. That's not something I can revise my opinion of. Not because I'm still carrying a wound, but because it told me exactly where I stood with you. And what I was actually worth." "I was wrong," she said, her voice cracking. "I know I was wrong. I believe you," he said quietly. "But knowing doesn't change what is. I have a wife and a daughter and a family I am not willing to jeopardize for a conversation that has nowhere left to go. I'm asking you, clearly, stop coming to find me. Stop inserting yourself into my life. That's all." He turned and walked toward the house. That evening, Elena walked through the front door wearing an expression of carefully maintained composure that she clearly found very difficult to sustain. Nathan put down what he was holding and waited. "When," she began, with measured precision, "were you planning to mention that she came here today?" "I was going to tell you tonight," he said. "Were you?" He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind. She held herself stiff for a moment, long enough to make her feelings known, then permitted it. She came to the gate. "I told her clearly that there is nothing between us, that there never will be again, and I asked her to stop. That's the entirety of it." Elena was quiet. Then she turned in his arms to face him, and beneath her composed surface the storm was plainly visible. "I'm never letting you go," she said. "I want that to be completely clear. Not out of insecurity. But because you are mine and I have never shared what belongs to me. I know that. And if she comes back—" "She won't," he said. "And if she does, she'll encounter you, which I'm quite certain she has no desire to experience again." A reluctant smile crossed Elena's face before she could catch it. He cupped her face in his hands and held her gaze until the last of the tension in her shoulders finally released completely. They didn't say much else. They didn't need to. Clara was gone not long after. She was reassigned to a different city, whether at her own request or through someone else's quiet arrangement. Nathan never found out and never spent time trying to. What mattered was that his household returned to the easy, unhurried rhythm he had come to love. Mia's laughter filling the mornings. Elena's warmth filling the evenings. The quiet, solid satisfaction of a life that fit well. One spring, during a family visit to his parents' house, he passed Clara on the street near the compound. She had grown considerably thinner, and time had settled differently on her face than he would have expected. He noticed all of this in the brief second before their eyes met, and then, by some silent, mutual understanding reached without a single word exchanged, They both looked away and kept walking in their opposite directions. That was all. No confrontation. No lingering glances. No chapter requiring a final scene. Just two people with a shared past who had finally arrived at the point where a single exchanged glance was sufficient acknowledgement that the story between them had ended thoroughly, irreversibly, and a very long time ago. Nathan continued down the street to his parents' house, where Mia was already waiting at the front step, indignant about how long he had taken and demanding to be carried inside immediately. He picked her up, balanced her on his hip, and walked through the door. Some chapters deserve to be closed completely. And when they finally are, the only worthwhile thing left to do is turn the page, and keep walking toward the people who are still waiting for you on the other side.